Hello and welcome to this edition of Arlington Public News. I'm James Milan, in for Paul Werlin.
And I'm Brenda Mahoney, in for Michelle Marino. At Arlington Public News, we bring you stories of interest to Arlington and surrounding communities. In tonight's newscast, we speak with an Iranian filmmaker about the New England premiere of his film. We meet a professor of sociology to discuss gender, jail, and drugs in Massachusetts. Plus, a look at the safety protocols being implemented in Arlington Public Schools.
That and more up next. Please stay with us. The Department of Public Works has begun the extensive process of repairing potholes across town. APN was curious about what is involved in this effort and paid a visit to the DPW to find out.
I'm Damon Turbitt for Arlington Public News, and I'm joined today by Dan Warren of the Department of Public Works. And Dan, this has been a pretty terrible winter. How much damage did this winter cause?
Well, with respects to potholes, I mean, the people know that every street has their share of them, and it's not unusual in that we get potholes, but the sheer numbers are a little different this year.
In terms of that kind of road damage, is this the worst winter or one of the worst winters you've seen?
Sure, this could be up there in the top three, I'll bet, for sure. Not a lot of frosties, but in potholes.
What do you guys have to do? What kind of process is it to get these potholes fixed?
Well, first you have to understand a pothole is what makes a pothole, and generally it's a freeze-thaw cycle. Water gets underneath the asphalt and then freezes overnight, lifts the asphalt up, then thaws during the day, it drops back down, and before you know it, after a few days, it just wants to pop right out of the hole. So generally, any pothole repairs we do during the winter are just temporary in nature, just due to the fact that we still have the freeze-thaw cycle, and last night it was down in the 20s. So in the next week or so, most of the pothole repairs we do will be more permanent.
Is there any way that you can prevent these potholes, or is this just inevitable? It's just going to happen every winter regardless?
It's inevitable. Older roads, trench repairs from public utilities, I mean, anything can contribute to it, but the water's inevitably always going to get under the road. Even new roads, it can happen too.
What is the fixing process like?
The process is to get all the loose asphalt out of the hole, down to where it's a little more solid base. Preferably the hole should be dry. We like to put a bit of an epoxy in, and then we'll fill it and tamp it well, and sometimes we'll seal the edges, most of the time we won't. All
right, and now obviously there are a ton of these that pop up through the course of a winter. How many holes do you guys find, and how do you expect the public to help you out with this?
We do. I mean, there's a lot of streets way up in the I call them obscure neighborhoods that we probably won't even drive through unless we're plowing. And it's always good to get a call, because we may not see that pothole for a long time, well into the summer usually, and by then the damage is already done.
Right, and now if the public does see these potholes and want to report them to you, what are some of the ways? Can you be reached online and through the phone, or?
Sure, you can, phone and online. If you go onto the town's website, arlington.gov, there's a request and answer center. You can go on there and make a request directly to me, the supervisor, or you can always call the town's dispatch, 781-316-3301, and they'll write it down and get it to me.
All right, well, after handling all the snow and all the potholes, how are your guys feeling at the Department of Public Works?
The guys are great. They give it 100% every day. They come in every day looking to do new things, and they just like doing their job. They like the people around town, and I couldn't say enough good things about them.
All right, thank you very much. I appreciate your time, and best of luck going forward, of course.
New safety protocols are coming to Arlington schools. School officials recently held an information session on ALICE. It's a program used nationally that calls for students and staff to alert, lock down, inform, counter, and evacuate in the instance of an intruder. APN spoke with the school superintendent and safety officials about why the new guidelines are needed and what it means for students and parents.
Keeping children safe in school is of utmost importance. While instances of active shooters in schools are very rare, the media attention such incidents receive has increased general anxiety about this issue. School administrations recognize that they need to exercise caution, including the implementation of specific procedures in emergency situations. To talk about the ALICE training being introduced in Arlington schools, we welcome Superintendent Dr. Kathleen Bodie, School Resource Officer Stephen Porcello, and Arlington Public Schools Court Liaison Cindy Sheridan-Curran. Thank you so much for joining us. So we'll dive right into it. What is ALICE?
ALICE is an acronym. It stands for Alert, Lockdown, Inform, Counter, and Evacuate. And what it does is we currently have basically just lockdowns and shelter in place in our school systems. What ALICE does is it enhances the current system that we have, and it empowers the faculty members and the students within the building to make decisions, real-time decisions based on the information that they have at any given time. So rather than just locked down into a classroom, if the information that's given to them dictates that they may want to leave the building, then they can leave the building.
How would this program actually fit into the daily existing curriculum?
Well, the trainings will take place, again, as I said, this spring and then next fall for the remainder of the elementary schools. So our goal is to kind of work it into the fabric of what they understand as emergency responses to things just like fire drills. So it won't be part of the classroom curriculum on a regular basis, but for the first few years we'll be kind of doing what they probably did many, many years ago when they first started training in fire drills, to just try to implement it in a way that it really becomes kind of the fabric of their reactions and they understand this option-based response to an emergency situation.
What are you hoping to receive out of implementing ALICE? What do you want to achieve out of this program?
Well, ultimately, we want to put in place practices and protocols that are going to keep our students and staff safe. Our thinking, and I mean this collectively, our country, and certainly in this area, has evolved. And we know that this process is going to save lives. Even when they have looked at recent tragedies and they go back and look at what if this had been in place, what would the differences have been in that situation. So we are confident that this will empower our students and staff to be able to act appropriately and safely in an emergency. And with any type of practice, you have to practice. If you don't do that and you don't have it built into the definite procedures of the school year, people can forget. So that is something that we will make sure we do as we do presently for lockdown, shelter in place, and fire drills.
If you would like even more information, please be sure to attend the ALICE implementation and school safety presentation at Arlington High School on April 6th at 7 p.m. On behalf of Dr. Bodie, Officer Porcello, and Ms. Sheridan Curran, I want to thank you for joining us. For Arlington Public News, I'm Akriti Jagmohan.
Well, we want to thank the school superintendent and school safety officials for coming into our studios and explaining a little bit more in depth about what ALICE is. They had the public information night, but it's good to even have another way for viewers to check it out.
These kinds of concrete guidelines will always kind of diminish the anxiety that people feel. So I think for students, teachers, parents, etc., this is good news. Our next story is about the 40B development that has been proposed for the Mugar site in East Arlington. APN spoke to Clarissa Rowe, former selectman and founder of the Arlington Land Trust, about the plan.
A 40B development plan has been proposed for the Mugar site in East Arlington. Oak Tree Development plans to build 219 units of affordable housing on the site off of Route 2. The plan is meeting local resistance. Among them is Arlington Land Trust. The group's founder, Clarissa Rowe, is worried about the impact on East Arlington neighborhoods. The site is located on a 100-year floodplain.
And that is not a good place to build. Yes. Because if you think of a sponge and you put a big building on top of the sponge, it's going to squeeze the water out towards the neighborhoods.
Oak Tree Development has been trying to build on this site for many years. And even though Rowe is against the plan for the Mugar site, she says she does want affordable housing to come to Arlington, just at other sites.
In this very, very wet site in East Arlington, I'm not for it. Yeah. When we were talking to Oak Tree before, in 2008, we offered them a couple of other sites to look at, and they weren't interested. But one of them was the Sims property, and one of them was Brigham's, both of which now are developed. Mm-hmm. But our master plan talks about other places for affordable housing. It's something we will always be for.
Rowe looks forward to hearing Oak Tree Development's plan. She is hopeful that both sides can work together to create a plan that could work for the Mugar site.
I'm not anti-development. In fact, as a landscape architect, I do development. Mm-hmm. So I don't want it to be untouched. I want it to be developed responsibly.
Town residents seem to be split on the Mugar site.
I'd say I'm generally in favor of some low-income housing coming to Arlington, but that Mugar site I'd like to see remain pristine. We're overbuilt as it is, so any open space that's available, we should just keep it that way.
I think it's definitely something that we need. I don't know if Arlington would be the place for it.
Rowe and the East Arlington neighborhoods are doing all they can to make sure that the Mugar site will be used responsibly. She is the leader of the Coalition to Save Mugar Wetlands. Their goal is to inform Arlington residents about the Mugar site and the challenges it faces.
In fact, we already have 879 people have looked at it. We're trying to put up information about flooding, traffic, 40B, the things that are coming into play in this.
Oak Tree Development is expected to submit their plan to Arlington town officials in the upcoming weeks. For Arlington Public News, I'm Tyler Trudeau.
In anticipation of the start of town meeting, Arlington Public News introduces a new series, Your Arlington Dollar. The series examines the budget process, where the money for town services and operations comes from, and where it's going. You may easily access all the installments in the series by going to our website, news.acmi.tv.
On March 24th, the Robbins Library hosted a panel discussion to explore the idea of better understanding different cultures through books, with an emphasis on learning about and understanding Islam. The event was co-sponsored by the Vision 2020 Diversity Task Group.
My Sister Lives on the Mantelpiece, this year's choice for Arlington Reads Together, sparks discussion on understanding other cultures. Robbins Library invited the Daughters of Abraham, an interfaith book group, to talk about their experience.
The Daughters of Abraham happened fairly spontaneously. There's a woman who's now deceased. Her name was Edie Howe. And in 2001, First Church in Cambridge in Harvard Square had an open chapel on the day of the 9/11 attacks. And Edie was sitting there, and she looked to one side, and there was a Jewish woman, and she looked to the other side, and there was a Muslim woman, and she looked over, and there was a Hindu woman, and there were women and men of all stripes, as you see in Harvard Square. And she realized that she needed to do something. And she thought about it, and she thought to herself that she knew how to run a book group. And she said she wanted to create a book group that would take books and explain to people what it means to live a religion. You know, you can study religion by reading doctrine and reading life cycle events and reading the rules and the theory. But that's not what she was trying to get at. She was trying to figure out, what does it mean to be walking down the street with the moral compass of different religions.
I live in Newton, and I've grown up most of my life in Newton, Massachusetts. I'm a software engineer. I'm a mother of two girls who also went to school, grew up in Newton, Massachusetts. And I'm involved with the Islamic Center of Boston in Wayland. Our whole family's involved there for a while, and been part of the Daughters of Abraham for almost 10 years.
I'm originally from Puerto Rico. My husband is Cuban. My son was born in Texas, and my daughter was born in Mexico City. So we sort of a little bit of everything. I'm Catholic. I live in Newton. And I joined Daughters of Abraham shortly after it got started in Newton, so about 10 years. And it's been a wonderful experience altogether.
In order to be able to talk about why you make the decisions you make, if you're going to talk about what you would do like the person in the book, you end up figuring out what part of that, for me, what part of that is because I'm Jewish, and what part of that is because of something else I learned in my life. And I ended up learning a lot more about why I'm really Jewish than I would have if I didn't have to explain it in that way.
The panelists then answered several questions from the audience about the book My Sister Lives on the Mantelpiece and the Daughters of Abraham.
I'm interested in finding out more about the Daughters of Abraham and getting involved in my own book group if I can.
The book itself, I think, has a hopeful message to it, but I think the idea that what people believe in practice does not form an insurmountable barrier between them is very inspiring.
For Arlington Public News, this is Yawa Degboe.
Well, you know, Brenda, as a particular fan of the library and believer in books' power to create connections across cultures, this is the kind of story that's just close to my heart.
Right, and it's interesting to hear how the authors actually delve into how their perspective influenced their writing as well of the various books. Well, Arlington Community Media Incorporated and the Arlington International Film Festival are joining forces in premiering films. ACMi will be the site of the New England premiere of the award-winning film Everything is Fine Here on Friday, April 24th at 7:30 in the evening. The film takes a candid, searing look at a traumatic event and its aftermath in modern-day Iran. APN met the filmmaker to discuss the film.
Hello and welcome. I'm James Milan, and I'm pleased to welcome into our studio Purya Ozerbaijani, an Iranian filmmaker, to talk about his film Everything is Fine Here, which we will be premiering here in conjunction with our partners at the Arlington International Film Festival. I understand that you financed this film yourself. What were the particular challenges that you faced in doing so?
Given the fact that there was no government backing of the movie, I had no sponsors to help with the funding of the movie. I used my own personal income, which was mainly through doing TV commercials for this endeavor. As you can imagine, supporting your family and at the same time trying to use part of that money for artistic doings cannot be easy. So this project was not an easy one.
The film explores women's place in Iranian culture. Can you talk a little bit about the effect of that and what the film has to say about that?
My film is not necessarily about women, even though there is obviously some focus on a woman. But at the same time, the bigger picture I try to portray is how we should all get along in society as a whole, not necessarily just how the women are portrayed or how the men are portrayed, but just as a society. That's what I wanted to sort of tell my story about.
Your film received the Human Rights Award at the Monaco Film Festival. I was wondering, what human rights do you feel are most affected in a situation like you explore in Everything is Fine Here?
The main point of my movie is not necessarily the subject of rape, but what consequences any violent action like that could have in the society and how somebody's rights could be easily pummeled by judging that person one way or another. So the movie is not necessarily about any specific human rights, but as human rights in general.
Is there anything else that you wanted to add about your film?
The only thing I want to add is the fact that my wife, who is here today, has always been by my side throughout my career, and I have always been able to count on her to be my partner, and I want to thank her for that.
For filmmaker Purya Ozerbaijani, I am James Milan. I want to remind you just one more time that we will be back here and showing the film we've been talking about on Friday, April 24th at 7:30 in the evening. All are welcome, and we hope to see you here. For Arlington Public News and Arlington Community Media, I'm James Milan, wishing you the best. The Church of Our Savior in Arlington is holding a book event on Sunday, April 26th. The featured speaker is sociologist Susan Surred, who will discuss her new book, Can't Catch a Break. The event is open to the public and of particular interest for those concerned with issues of social justice. APN met with Dr. Surred to talk about her research into the challenges faced by women trapped in difficult situations.
There are many casualties in the war on drugs. One example is that 70% of women in correctional systems of Massachusetts have faced some sort of physical or sexual abuse in their lifetime. My guest today, Susan Surred, is a professor of sociology at Suffolk University and co-author of the book Can't Catch a Break. She and her colleague document the daily lives of a group of women caught in this vicious cycle. Thank you so much for joining us.
And thank you for having me.
Most definitely. In the introduction of your book, you posed a question: have prisons become the way that America deals with human suffering? Why did you pose such a question?
First of all, the rates of incarceration are incredibly high in the United States. They're higher than any other country in the world and substantially higher than in any other country in the world. But when we look at the people who are incarcerated, and my interest is particularly in women, almost everybody has lived a life filled with enormous amounts of horrible things, enormous amounts of suffering. So for example, we often read in the newspapers and hear on the radios that a large percentage of the incarcerated population has mental health challenges. And equally large has physical health challenges. A third of the women that I came to know were diagnosed with learning disabilities when they were in elementary school. At least 70%, and some estimates are as high as 90% of women caught in the correctional system have been abused, have been beaten up, have been raped in the past. And very high numbers of men caught in the correctional system have been abused as children, have suffered a wide variety of horrible things in their lives: poverty, homelessness. So yeah, I mean, I don't see that we have other social institutions that are stepping in and addressing suffering.
How does the society, they get turned away from the society because of their criminal history, the record that they hold. What should the society or the individual do to demolish that stigma?
Well, there's very little that the individual can do, and the evidence that I could give for that is that of the women who began our project, there are only 2 who have been stably housed and stably employed for the whole 5 years that we followed them. So the other women all tried various things, but there was really almost no success. So it's on the societal level, not the individual level. I think we absolutely have to abolish any kind of restrictions around hiring people who have criminal records. The numbers are so enormous after a couple of decades of mass incarceration that we're moving towards a situation where we have a huge underclass of people who are just not employable, however much they want to get a job.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Professor Surred, for bringing light to a subject that we know too little about. I hope that this is a first step toward addressing this troubling issue. On behalf of Professor Susan Surred, for Arlington Public News, I'm Akriti Jagmohan. Thank you for joining us.
The calendar says spring, but Arlington High School playing fields haven't quite caught up yet. APN takes a look at what some teams are doing to practice and prepare for the slow-to-get-going spring sports season.
Spring has arrived just in time for softball season. However, the fields didn't get the memo. For the first 3 weeks of the season, the Arlington High School softball team has been forced to practice indoors. What does the team think?
We absolutely hate it. We just feel confined in one area.
Coach Matt O'Loughlin says the girls will have to continue waiting.
I would say realistically, I'm not planning on anything before the 20th. I think the 20th would probably be when our field is done, ready to actually have a game on.
The outfield has been deemed playable, but large patches of mud in the infield like this one along the first baseline is making it difficult for teams to get outside. Practicing indoors has its positives, but is far from ideal for the best interest of the team.
When we're outside, we don't have as much BP action, but when we're inside, we have a lot more with the machine. Outside, there's definitely more because we can work with outfielders more outside than inside.
The wait has been long, but O'Loughlin has no complaints about how his team has handled the situation.
They're just happy to play softball every day. Obviously, they'd rather be outside, but they do a great job hiding how bored they're getting with me saying and doing the same things over and over again.
Despite not having an outdoor practice, Arlington still took care of its first away game of the season. They beat Stoneham 14-2. For Arlington Public News, I'm Damon Turbitt.
Julia Bloom is back. In this segment, Julia walks around town in a hopeful search for flowers.
It's amazing what a few weeks of nice weather will do. There are finally flowers and plants sprouting in Arlington. New grass and flowers can be found in backyards and parks, We have white, purple, and yellow crocuses, as well as small tulips and some new green grass. The trees haven't budded yet and won't have leaves until May, but after 4 months without green, it is great to see something new on the ground. Robbins Park looks very different than it did a month ago. The snow is mostly gone and a few plants have survived the winter. The only snow I can see in town is small piles of dirty ice, but I'm pretty sure that, by May, all signs of winter will be gone. For Arlington Public News, this is Julia Bloom.
Well, Julia has a relentless pursuit for spring. I think it's been since the end of the snow, really, that she's been looking for signs of spring, and she's been finding them.
Yep, and I think I'm looking forward to all the New Englanders I know getting just quite giddy as the weather actually gets better.
It's getting better. Spring fever is coming. Well, Arlington Public News is a production of Arlington Community Media and functions as a gateway of local participation in issues and events of interest to the community.
Check out our latest segments on the web at news.acmi.tv and like us on Facebook. Join us next time for another edition of Arlington Public News. I'm James Milan.
And I'm Brenda Mahoney. Thanks for joining us.